You're listening to the Governor's Podcast, which is hosted by school governors, for school governors, and for all involved in or impacted by education governance. On the Governor's Podcast, we have open, honest, and transparent discussions about governance in the UK education sector, sharing and providing insights into the realities of entering the boardroom, sitting around the governing board table, and leaning in.
Hello, I'm Sharon Warmington and I support schools and academies as a governor, governance practitioner and a clerk. I'm also the CEO of the National Black Governors Network, supporting the education sector in diversifying their governing boards.
And it's Olivia D Hinds here, an under 30, unapologetically black female who is changing the face and space of school governance.
And you're listening to the Governor's Podcast. Okay, let's get into today's topic.
So what is one thing that you as a clerk would want governors to know?
Oh, wow. There are so many.
Okay, 3 things. Or, just main things.
To know about what? To know about clerking? To know about how they should treat clerks?
About the clerking. I would... No. Actually, let me correct myself. Interpret the question how you wish to.
Right, what would I want governors to know about clerks?
Yeah.
That even if they are directly employed, i.e. they've got another role in the school, that clerking for you or your school is not the only thing that they do.
Right, okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
So myself as an example, I clerk 2 schools. But that isn't all. Currently. No, I'm not taking on anymore.
No, but currently meaning you've experienced clerking more.
I've done 8 schools.
That's
eight
your
schools
max.
is my maximum. Has been my maximum. And I know clerks who do more than 20. I don't know
really?
how.
How?
Yeah, I don't know how they do it.
Wow.
I really, really don't.
Oh my gosh. But even in that instance, your original sentence, your first sentence still applies, because even if you are clerking in 20 schools, that doesn't... One, in each individual school, you have 19 others.
Yes.
And then your clerking is what you do. It's not who you are. So you're still a human being.
Absolutely.
Outside of all of that.
And another thing that I wish governors and maybe senior leaders within the schools who are communicating with clerks know and understand.
Yeah, that bit.
Is that we work on sociable hours, not just the meeting. So you may see us for the 2 hours, 2.5 hours of a meeting, but the other stuff that we do,
or the leading up to and after,
it's not even things around the meeting.
Right.
So it's not necessarily the leading up to,
okay,
and then the drafting of the minutes and actions and things that afterwards.
Okay,
that's understandable and it's almost a given. It's knowing and understanding that one clerk has to have a professional relationship with every single governor and every single head, senior leader attached to that school in order to do the job. Yeah. So you could be, again, using myself as an example. When I was doing the 8 schools, I calculated over the course of 12 months or an academic year, I had about 120 meetings.
Yo, that's like 1 every 3 days.
Right?
Yeah.
And I was supporting over 100 governors and senior leaders in that time as well. And by supporting, I mean, you could have a head. Some of my heads would start working on a Sunday evening. So, yes. And I knew that because the emails they'd be responding to my emails or sending me emails. So that could be on a Sunday evening. Another head worked like first thing on a Monday, that's when they carved out time in their diary to deal with their governance things.
Yes.
There could be a chair of governors who never responds to emails.
Yes.
But the moment you send them a text or a WhatsApp, then that's when you'll get a response to them, because their day job just
it's
means
just the way
that
in which they communicate.
the way in which they work.
Yeah.
Another governor you could not get anything from at all, but if you call them to attend a panel meeting, that they will be there for you, because their role, their job is flexible enough to allow that to happen. The clerk is the one that has to know each one of those governors on an almost individual basis.
That's so true.
And their idiosyncrasies, whether they will respond to emails, whether they prefer text messages, whether you can call them out of the blue.
It's that personalized customer service in a way.
Absolutely.
That's what it sounds like.
So then you duplicate that or multiply that by the X amount of schools. So if a clerk is working in a trust, like when I had the 8 schools, 4 of them were in one trust.
Wow.
And I had to say to them, look, I'm working across these 4 schools. You all know each other. So you can't all have Sharon at the same time on the same day. It's just impossible.
Yeah.
So they trusted me enough to allow me to set the meeting dates for the academic year.
Which is where it really starts when you think about it, because no person can be in 2 places
at
once.
Absolutely.
So if 4 schools are coming from the same trust, it makes sense for the schools to understand we have one clerk that we're sharing.
Yes.
So I need my meeting on this date because it needs to happen before this thing in school. And it's like, okay, then we'll have our meeting on a different date because we both want Sharon, or all 4 of us want Sharon, but Sharon is only one person.
Absolutely. But also within the same trust, if you have a clerk working in the same trust, they are producing information leading to the same ultimate date, which is usually the trust board meeting.
Of course.
Or it could be the end of year accounts or budget setting or whatever. So the trust board will always take priority. Their dates will always take priority. But again, if you've got 2 or 3 schools, you have to produce the minutes for those LGBs. All for that. I remember one.
It sounds insane.
I remember one February half term, I had 13 sets of minutes.
Oh, I think I remember you telling me this.
And I nearly cried. I really did, because
just overwhelmed with
it was overwhelmed.
Like
it was
pressure.
I'm going to miss my deadlines here. So what I did in that instance, instead of destroying myself or setting myself up to fail, I emailed all of my heads and I said to them, you know that I clerk all these schools.
Yes.
Luckily I didn't have to produce the minutes for a trust board meeting.
And it also wasn't your first set of meetings and
no,
minutes with
it wasn't,
them, so they're used to your working
me.
style.
They knew me, and I just said to them, look, I'm really sorry, but the minutes are going to be late, but you will get them by this date.
Yes.
And I never forget, one of the heads came back to me, just an amazing head teacher. He came back to me and he said, Sharon, the world is not going to stop turning.
That is so true.
You know
what I think they probably valued more than anything?
The honesty and
the communication, that honesty, being very transparent, and being very real, and just owning the fact that you took responsibility, but also said, it is humanly impossible.
It was
for me to expect myself, because that's not even doing one a day when you think about it.
If you think a set of minutes on average would be between 3,000 and 5,000 words, depending on the meeting. But a 2-hour meeting, maybe 6 to 8 pages of minutes, runs to about between 3,000 and 5,000 words. So 13 sets of minutes.
Does it also depend how you minute as well?
I don't understand the question.
Because I would assume that very much like essay styles, like the way in which people write, like what their writing style, written communications like, I can imagine no 2 clerks' minutes look the same.
No.
So clerks minute in different
ways.
Absolutely.
I minute in a way that those who were present at the meeting have a reminder. But to me, my audience, my reader, are those who weren't at the meeting.
That's so true. So
it has to make sense to somebody who wasn't there.
Yes.
That's always my starting point. So I don't cut corners.
You remove all assumed language.
Right.
And things.
I don't assume knowledge, and I don't use a lot of abbreviations because it has to stand on its own and make sense. So not that it doesn't constantly refer to another set of minutes or to another meeting, so that the reader has to juggle back and forward through other sets. It has to stand on its own. This is my opinion. It has to stand on its own and make total sense.
Yeah.
So for some, I've read minutes and I've thought, I can't even read these minutes, and I was at the meeting because it's so shorthand and so brief. To me,
it's not saying anything.
It doesn't say anything.
Right.
You have to have known what the discussion was about to understand what that line is.
Okay.
There's no
clarity.
There's no real substance.
Right.
Now, it's not for me to stand in judgment.
No, but you're just saying in a personal opinion.
Yeah, but I'm proud to say that my minutes have stood the test of time. And I've been in situations where one of my schools, the head was an Ofsted inspector, and so I took a lot of guidance from them.
Of course.
Because they're constantly going into schools. I also do external reviews of governance in third sector, charity sector, and I was interim head of governance for a charity, and I did the first set of minutes I did for that board.
Yeah.
The chair came back and was like, that's a phenomenal set of minutes,
Sharon.
Wow. We have no correction. And that was my first meeting.
And you're open to corrections.
And I'm absolutely, I had one governor, loved it, absolutely loved him. He was the only one who would pick up any grammatical errors.
The punctuation.
But that to me told me that you read it.
Right, I hear you.
Which helps me, because, I have no problem with being corrected, and if I've got something wrong, however small, and it was never in a way,
in a tone that felt like they were speaking down to you,
absolutely,
or just being difficult, or
absolutely,
challenging
in the meeting. Yeah, when it came to, is everyone happy with the minutes? And it's really weird because they all
I'd be that governor.
They turned to this particular governor because he was, English was his strong point.
Well.
And I remember one particular meeting, he said, disappointingly, there are no corrections.
He couldn't find anything. He was looking.
And I was like, yes!
I've been that governor where if there's anything in the minutes that, it's usually anything in the previous minutes of the previous meeting that needs to be flagged. Most of the time, if it's a spelling error or something, I'll go to the clerk post-meeting or send an email just to say this is what I've spotted. A couple of times, the things that I've pulled up have actually saved minutes, because I remember there was one that was quoting a financial figure and it had too many zeros on it, so it sounded like there was millions of billions. I was like, do you really want to be saying this? Because I think it had the word million as well as the zeros, and I was like, that could easily throw you off. And I think it was the chair was like, good spot, Olivia. And I was like, when it stands out to me, I was like, I've got to draw attention to it. And then I can imagine very much like the senior leadership team appreciating when someone's read one of their papers that they've submitted. I'm sure the clerks appreciate when the minutes have been read and you can flag something. And they're actually, from the clerks I've worked with, they are quite thankful when you've alerted them to something that they probably missed. Sometimes it's just honest typos.
Absolutely.
And so,
you are human.
Just flag it.
And as we've said, especially if you're clerking multiple schools,
of course,
or you're churning out minutes, especially during a pressurized time, it's very easy to miss things. Off a recent set of minutes, I forgot to minute that the minutes had been accepted. And it was only at the next meeting that I saw it. The chair went, are there any corrections? And I went, yes, chair. the clerk forgot to minute.
Yeah, you've got personality as well.
I was talking about myself.
In the third person.
Absolutely. But a lot of it is to do with relationships.
Yes. Which goes back to what you were saying originally about building up a relationship with individual governors and having a presence around the table, even though around the table you're the one that's unlikely to speak. But you're still there and you're still a very valued part of how it all hangs together. Okay, so minutes is clearly a huge part of clerking.
Yes.
However,
there's so much more. But the misconception, I think, by a number of governors is that all we do is minute.
And
because
that's what I wanted to make sure we clarify.
Because it's such a big thing, then it almost appears that that's all we do.
It's one of the main things, but it's not the only thing.
Absolutely not. It's one of the things that takes the most time.
Yes, of course.
But it's not the only thing. Like, for example, one of my schools, I've just gone through parent elections, and that's a process.
Yeah.
And for me, it was the first time I was doing an electronic process.
What do you mean by an electronic process?
Because usually it's like almost like a paper-based one.
Oh, where you write your...
Where letters will go out,
right?
And then there's a ballot and the enveloping, the double enveloping. I won't get into the detail, but yeah, I can see you looking blankly on me like, what on earth do you mean by double enveloping?
How secure is this thing?
I won't even explain that. It's all about transparency, making sure that only those who are entitled to vote, and all that kind of stuff.
Right. Okay.
But this was the first time I'd done it digitally using a Google form.
Okay.
And it worked really well. We got two governors.
Was that your choice to do it digitally via Google form? Was the school implemented that process?
It was my choice because the process has to start with the clerk.
Right. Okay.
The head teacher is usually what's called the returning officer.
Okay.
But they can't be involved in the process in terms of deciding who.
Yes.
And I had to explain that to one of my governors that, we can't decide who which parent is elected, because it's elected parent governors are elected by the parent body. Right. That's just the way it is.
Yeah.
And whether irrespective of what you may think or feel, it is what it is. And so that's something else that we do.
Manage elections, manage the terms of office, knowing when governors are coming to the end, the cycle in and out.
And we are constantly thinking ahead, because we have to. So my brain is already in the spring term.
Wow. Okay.
And the autumn term, we haven't even hit half term yet. Yes. But my brain is already in the sum of term, because in one school that's a maintained school, they operate their financial year on the financial calendar, so to the end of March, and another one is an academy, and they operate on the academic year.
Right.
So I had a finance committee today, on the day we're recording this, and we weren't quorum.
Ooh.
So we couldn't do the accounts.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, we've got a deadline date. And I'm thinking, are you serious?
Well, what do we do?
So now I've got to squeeze in
another meeting,
another finance committee ahead of the board, which is already set.
Oh yeah, because everything, like, there's a timeline.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a process.
There's a process, yeah. And certain meetings feed into other meetings.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so I have to set the meeting. The accountant said that the auditors won't get the audited accounts now to me till the middle of November.
Oh wow.
And my board meeting is in the middle of November. So now I've got to swap out that board meeting for the finance committee, because you can't get the papers and have the meeting on the same day. And then I've got to push my board meeting back, which is going to be harder because now I've got to get all of my board.
You've got to coordinate all those diaries.
Right. So it's really crazy, and it's like panel meetings and things like, if you've got to pull together an exclusion panel or a complaints panel or group.
And the turnaround time of those.
Right. You get a window. And that window has to include notifying all having the time to get the panel together in the first place.
Yes.
Notifying all those people involved, and giving them time to read the paper, pull the pack together, and distribute the pack, and give them time. At least 5 days to read those that information.
The thing about the 5 days, something I've heard you say is that you as a clerk make sure that you don't include weekends in the reading time for governors.
Yeah.
Was that something that has come from your own professional experience, that weekends shouldn't be assumed? Is it because you learned that from someone else, or a school or a trust that you were involved in did that, and then you were like, that makes sense, let me apply it? So is that driven by you personally in your professional experience, or is that driven by what someone else has kind of done and then you're like, that makes sense?
Well, bear in mind my age.
Okay.
So I'm old school, meaning that governance, before it became the thing it is today, has always been part of my working life. And when I worked for an organisation in the 90s, 7 days was a standard thing, and that's when we were printing and posting
information.
Yeah. So and it was my boss, actually, the chief executive, who said, the board have to get papers 7 days in advance. Now, I just assumed 7 days was 7 days, and yes, it would obviously a weekend would include that, to the point where if for any reason we couldn't hit the post to get them out, then I would literally hire a car and hand deliver them just to all the board members, to make sure.
The special postwoman.
I was special delivery. So I've adopted it from that point.
Okay.
In some terms of reference, it is written. I always make sure in my terms of reference it is written, because that's my commitment.
Like the terms of reference you oversee.
The terms of reference for that committee or for the board. In Mem and Arts, I'm not sure if it appears in some Mem and Arts. I think we'll say it.
Okay.
Others may be a bit more flexible. I don't know, but on a professional level, I always make sure it's 7 days.
Okay.
And that is irrespective of whether the papers are ready or not.
That's another thing, because I've been on the receiving end where a clerk almost hasn't hit the button to send papers, and they're delaying because there's a paper that they're ready to receive.
It's not right.
And it's only as an experienced governor did I, so this was probably within the last 12 months or so, did I say, because I, just with me knowing the cycle of things, it's not like I was new to the space. I said, send what you've got, and then anything else can follow. And then if it's something to make a decision on, we can decide as a body whether we feel like it's right to make a decision on something that we haven't had enough time to digest.
Well, sometimes you can't even do that. I have stepped in. Going back to the 7 days thing, it is not professionally right for anybody to expect governors to read papers at the weekend, right? Their weekend is their weekend, however they choose to use it. You and I will work over the weekend. We almost see a day is just a day.
Yes.
Right. But I'm not going to insist that somebody else works over the weekend, because weekends traditionally are the time when you're not working.
Yes, usually.
So if you choose to read papers, that's your choice. But if you choose not to,
it shouldn't be dictated by someone else.
It shouldn't be assumed
by someone else.
Because I've gone toe to toe with a co-sec who has insisted that papers can go out on the Friday and the meeting's on the Monday.
How does that work? That definitely doesn't work, because then unless you're some people will say Friday, but they won't send them at 9 a.m. on a Friday. It's coming across like 5 p.m. or 7 p.m.
I refuse to do that.
That's ridiculous.
I have had papers arrive in my inbox that I have refused to send.
Fair enough.
And
so
I will stand as clerk. Yes.
So you as a clerk, you set your own deadlines for when you want to receive papers because you know when you want to get them out.
No, it's not that I set my own deadlines. It's in the governing docs.
Yeah, but you use that as like, so you know when you are expected to receive.
Because if governors have agreed to the terms of reference, and the code of conduct and all of that, then absolutely I'm following that. Yeah. So it's not Sharon being funny.
Nah, it's you doing.
This is
exercising good governance practice.
This is good governance practice.
Right.
So, and once the accounts came literally the day before the meeting, and I wouldn't circulate them.
You know what? You've got to have your integrity, your morals, what you stand by, and it's got to be uniform. There was something that I was, I think, either watching or listening to recently, the last few days of, since before we recorded this, that the person says principles. When you have principles, it's not supposed to be in one area. Principles means from top to bottom, left to right. It's, if you're saying that you are an honest person, it's being honest in every aspect of your life.
Yeah.
So principles is what you stand on and stand by, and have it's the thing that brings everything together. So if you're saying this is the governance principle, then I am going to execute it. I'm going to make sure and hold whoever I'm working with accountable to that term. To those terms.
And it doesn't matter. It's as I say, I don't charge a different rate to secondary schools or primary schools or grammar schools or what. My rate is my rate, because you are getting Sharon.
Yes.
And you're getting all of the knowledge and experience that I've gained over the last 10, 20, 30 years in one space. I'm not going to deliver my governance service differently in this environment than I would in that environment. You'll get it. So, I will sit around a table and say, I'm sorry, but you can't make that decision. Because it's not, it's out of your remit according to the terms of reference. I've done that.
That's fair.
Where a committee wanted to agree a spend, and two quotes, one was within their threshold and one was above their threshold. It had to go to the governing body. And I said, you can't make this decision. And everyone sort of looked at me, and I'm thinking...
But then I would say that example you've given, not as a standalone, but just as an example here, is almost like using my abstract ideas and like, what do you call them, analogies. Like the clerk is almost like the spine. You're there. You don't see it, but it's there. It's there to remind you all of the other limbs hang off that spine, right? So
I like that.
So the clerk is the spine. Then because obviously you have a governing body, so you think of the whole body. You have someone who knows how to operate fingers and someone who knows how to operate toes. The chair is probably the head with the heads and the brain in it and all that kind of stuff. But the spine, that's your backbone. That is someone who reminds you when you're trying to go a bit too far. It's like, oh, come back. Oh, remember this, this line, this comma, this section here in the terms of office. Oh, you can't do that. Yes, you can do that. It's very much like how annually, the first LGB of every meeting, the clerk makes sure that the chair doesn't just assume that they're chairing again.
Yeah.
It's like, we have to let the chair. Yes, you do have to leave. Yeah. You may know that you're going to get all the votes you need, but you do need to leave the room and allow that nomination to happen and things like that. So I'd say the clerk is the spine.
Yeah.
You need the spine.
Well, that's why every governing body or trust board has to have a governance professional, and whether that's a COSEC or a clerk or head of governance, whatever the title is, you need that professional person. And this again is what really gets my goat when we are viewed as just minute takers and the remuneration. Anybody who knows me will know that remuneration is a big thing for me in terms of clerks being properly remunerated, because clerks are still being paid termly.
That sounds so alien. I don't know anyone in any industry, in any job, paid every 3 months?
Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
Absolutely appalling. And
it's worse if that is someone's main source of income.
Yeah,
that's horrible.
And those who are paid poorly. And when you calculate, going back to what I was saying in terms of unsociable hours and all the different hours that we do, when you break down the hourly rate, some of them are actually paid lower than the national minimum wage.
It's crazy for the hours you put in, and everything you were saying, hanging on that original idea or thought or practice in terms of engaging on a one-on-one personal stroke professional basis with each of the governors, so that you understand who you're bringing in, because I can very much imagine that clerks are part of, very much you said, the panels and coordinating meetings, but recruiting governors as well, from the induction stage. Who do you go to ask all your questions? Who sets you up on this training program and that training program over there? And who even sends reminders?
Different to that. When I again was doing my 8 schools, I was joining a trust where 3 other schools were completely new to me. So you imagine, I'm going into a situation new, and I've not only got to minute that meeting, I've got to know who people are around the table.
Yes.
And I remember when the chair was starting the meeting, and I says, "Excuse me, chair.
Yeah.
Can we just do a round robin, please?
Because I don't know who these faces are.
I have no idea who's in here." I don't know who the governor, and you could pass around a piece of paper where governors sign and all that kind of stuff, but I don't know that Tom's not here or Jane's not here or whatever. True. That in 3 months' time I'll know them by name or whatever.
Yeah.
This is many clerks are entering the space, and especially those who may work for a governance service.
There's that, or if they're stepping in for another clerk.
Or if they're stepping in for a clerk, and so they're coming in new to that space. I always say, because I deliver minute taking, and I remember saying to somebody who thought that minutes were really easy, I says, you sit down and minute the news one day. And they looked at me like, what do you mean? I says, just minute the news.
And there's no name on the screen to show you who's talking.
And see how easy that is.
Yeah, and because the information's changing all the time.
Right, they're cut into different articles. They're
cut into different locations to bring in different pieces. And,
right.
Yeah, interviewing people.
Right, you try and minute dialogue that is going on that you've had no previous knowledge of.
Wow.
That's what minuting a meeting for the first time for a school. Even as an experienced minute taker.
Yes, of course.
So one of the things that I do as practice, and this is something that I've adopted, any school that I join, I make it a mission of mine. Before my first meeting, I must read all of the minutes from the previous academic year.
Is that committees included or just LGB?
Where, if I have time, I do committees as well.
But you prioritise the LGB.
I prioritise the whether it's an LGB or it's a GB.
Yeah.
I prioritise that, just so that I can get a feel of what's being discussed, and that's why. When I was saying earlier about minutes being for people who weren't at the meeting.
So true, I get it now.
If I go back and I read minutes that don't hang together on their own, it's hard to follow.
And then pick up.
Right. If a school's going through a capital build, or there's a major project going on, or there's an issue, say they're in measures for argument's sake, and where is the information about how they are navigating their way out of measures?
So you're talking about cohesion, evidence of cohesion in the minutes of what is being discussed and what is recorded, because I know that Ofsted use the minutes to understand how we've supported and challenged our senior leadership teams. But talking about all of that, I know as a governor, you have a lot of training courses and annual things that come around annually. You have to always do your keeping children safe in education. I like to call it KICSI because, you know, I'm making that a word. And then you've got safeguarding, and then you've got other training that you may have to do, so it's mandatory or you can sign up for. Is there training for clerks?
There's no required training for clerks.
Do you think there should be?
That's a hard question to answer because not every clerk sees it as a profession.
Right.
Meaning that it's not a career for them. It could be that they fell into it, or they are helping out, or they've been doing it that long that they're supporting one school in rural wherever, and they're happy doing that. For some, the access to training is restricted. There are barriers, and that's one of the reasons. Making a sidestep into the National Association of School and College Clerks.
Is that like your shameless plug?
That's there's nothing shameless about it. I'm making a plug for nasc.co.uk. That was one of the reasons why Fiona and I, Feestag and I, we talked a lot about what was there for clerks, and we as clerks couldn't really find anything to put our finger on. I'm of the mindset, just because it's the way I am, if there's training that is geared towards governors, then there's no reason why I shouldn't be there either.
Okay, yeah. As in go on the same training as governors.
But that was just my mindset.
Yes.
You know, and especially if none of my governors wanted to go on it, I'm thinking, well, I'm going to go on it.
Yeah.
Because I'm constantly wanting to feed my knowledge.
Yeah, you're a feeder.
So
you like to be
fed. I would do that. You know, but the reason why we created NASC was to almost cut through all of that and say to clerks, this is a professional body for you. So you can literally put on your CV, on your profile, you are a member of the National Association of School and College Clerks.
NASCC.
Yeah. And any training that, like we've got some sessions coming up. One of them is on being an independent clerk, what that means, because even I know that some local authorities have cut their service, and clerks have been left to almost find and fumble their way through becoming self-employed, and it's a minefield and can be quite frightening for some. So there's that. That's one of the first masterclasses that we're doing. We're also going to be doing training around, I fundamentally believe in clerks being trained in corporate governance as well, because especially if you're working in an academy trust, even if you're not the head of governance or the COSEC, understanding that when they ask for the related party transactions or why is this governor not registered on Companies House, or why are the members not on, you know, just understanding the legal framework and the governance framework for a multi-academy trust.
Because when you think about it, it is an organization.
It is.
And operating in like a business, like a company.
Absolutely.
So therefore, there's a lot of principles, like I said before, that overlap between the corporate sector and also the education sector. So it will only give you that transferable skills and transferable knowledge.
Yeah, and what we've found with since we launched NASC a couple of weeks ago now.
Yes, beginning of October.
Yeah, is that we're getting emails through with direct questions.
Yes.
We're getting emails through with requests for, have you got this?
Specific content,
and so whilst we are building the content, obviously we're not like a lot of the organisations out there with,
that have been established for years.
Absolutely, lots of resources, lots of staff, all of that can make things happen.
1st of October 2021, that's the launch date.
That's when we started, you know, and so we are finding that, you know, they're asking questions and we answer them and offer that support. I had one say to me, you know, I'd really love to go, I really wanted to go to this masterclass, but it clashes with a governing body meeting. Is there a recording?
Will it be recorded?
And I said, you know, yes, we're going to record it, but if it doesn't answer your questions, then come back to me.
Yes.
You know, and that's what that sort of assurance. David Baum, who was on one of our speakers at our conference on the 3rd of September, and that conference is available on the website as well.
Oh, okay.
He used a word that I hadn't used before,
right?
In relation to clerking and the governance professional. We give assurance. And what I want to do personally as Sharon Warmington, but also as one of the founders of NASC, is I want to give assurance to our members that we are there for them. We will go into battle for them if a fight is what is required. And what I would say to governors, please support your clerk. Ask them if they are a member of NASC.
Or is there something that they feel that they need in order to do their role? Sometimes just start in there, especially if you're not aware of organizations that support clerks or support governance professionals or support governors or support governance in general. But just like you do a skills audit, because we did an episode on this for governors, and see if there's any gaps that governors would like to fill. Ask your clerk, speak to your clerk, say, is there anything that you've seen, or is there anything that you're aware of, or is there anything that you've thought about that will help you do your role better?
Yeah, it's not just the responsibility of the head and the chair to talk to the clerk.
I like talking to the clerk. I like talking to everyone, really, but if I'm first in a room to the meeting, they're a person at the end of the day. You talk. And I guess it helps them with what you were saying in terms of learning people's names and personalities and what people do and stuff. They're there to be networked. They're not supposed to sit in a corner and be tapping away or writing away, and you ignore them.
But some do. Some can't even sit around the table. I mean, how crazy is that?
Do you think that's dictated to them, or is that a confidence thing?
No, I think that the expectation is that the clerk sits to the side.
That's not right. You're part of the meeting?
No, I never do that.
You don't do that.
I never do that.
You get your seat.
I usually sit at the head of the table.
Or next to the chair.
I rarely sit next to the chair, actually.
Oh, right, okay. Like opposite, maybe?
I know that in one school I did, because they felt more comfortable having me next to them.
Just like a quick eye glance.
Yeah. But if I have a choice, I will sit, because most chairs don't sit at the head of the table.
Yes.
From what, in my experience.
Depending on the structure of the room.
And it depends on the table. If it's a rectangle table, I always try and sit opposite the chair. So if the chair is at the head, I sit at the other end, purely because I want to be able to see the whole table.
I get you.
If I'm sitting in the middle, I've got to lean forward or whatever to see who's talking, and that's just not. I can't take minutes like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, you have some. I've had some very interesting chairs as well. I had one chair that used to message me in the meeting and try and make me laugh.
I guess that's all a part of when you think about it, when you do office work, or if you work in an office, you build those interactions with your colleagues.
Yeah, where you can have a bit of fun, have a laugh.
It doesn't always have to be, doom and gloom and heavy and, we can only speak about this line that's printed in this paper and we can't speak about anything else. No, if you want to joke about the fact that the chair couldn't attend the meeting because they were in another country on a holiday, you do that, you move on. But yeah, so what would you say is your takeaway then as a clerk? Either something you most enjoy about clerking, or advice you would give, or more, or both of those?
For some strange reason, I love clerking. And I'll say it like that because for anybody who knows me outside of the education sector,
yes,
because I do public speaking, I do training, I do executive coaching, all of that, and the purse is just a lot bigger. And people look at me and go, why'd you do that?
Because you genuinely have an enjoyment for
it. I absolutely do love it. I really, really do.
What is it that you love? If you could be specific or about one of the things that you love, what is it that makes you
I'll tell you what I enjoy the most: entering a situation and improving it.
Oh, you love entering with into a semi-chaotic space and leaving knowing that you organized it.
Yeah, it's like
Sharonized.
I remember this book by Tom Peters that said thriving on chaos.
Right, okay.
And I don't know why, but I enjoy adding value in that way.
I like that.
Once I've done that and I feel that I can't do any more, I know that it's time for me to go. Because what I never want to do is to be in a position where I become complacent.
Of course.
Or I just let things slide because I know the people and I know they mean well. Or I'm writing minutes and I'm writing what wasn't necessarily said at the meeting, but I know what they meant.
No.
I don't want to ever take my governance to that level where it becomes complacent.
I hear you.
So if I feel that yes, I've reached the top of what I can do in this situation,
I hear you.
Then it's time for me to leave, and I will go to.
That's how you've often made all your decisions about the schools that you no longer clerk at. It's because my time here is done.
My time here is done, and I always make sure I leave it in a stronger position. Even if that is, it's not to say that the outgoing clerk didn't.
Yes.
But
or that the incoming clerk won't continue.
Yeah. But I try and build on what's there. If the foundation is strong, I build on what's there, and then make sure it's left better than how I entered it. Not that when I entered it wasn't good, if that makes sense.
I would say I'm currently a governor at a school that you once clerked, and sometimes just a couple of pieces of the documentation that comes around, I can tell that you created it because I know what fonts you like to use. So it's just getting updated. The document's just getting updated. Like for example, the noting down. I don't know if it's like a record of what titles or responsibilities governors have.
Yeah.
So you know what committees they're a part of and stuff. And sometimes I see the document come round or the way it's highlighted or something. I'm like, I recognize that font. That's a very Sharon document.
I do have a particular style. And I recognize.
So then that's the thing to clerks. You know, don't be afraid to create your own style. That's fine.
Absolutely, and make sure it makes sense. And just because you see, like I saw a form the other day, I had to complete a supplier form, and it had fax number on it. And I'm thinking, it's 2021. Has nobody looked at this form and said, you know
what? We don't need
that anymore. That's how great we you know, there are things that we just don't update or we don't change, and I don't know why.
Yeah.
You know, we don't put email signatures on for every email that and you know, I've got 10 different accounts, you know, but for my schools, I make sure that my email signature says clerk to the governing body or clerk to the trust board.
That's just a way of like presenting yourself.
Absolutely.
You know, just being clear about who you are. You know, it's almost like setting out your desk, what you want your desk to look like in your office. I'm emailing, so how do I want to show up in that space?
One thing I'd just like to leave with governors is, can you, if you are joining a governing body,
where's this going?
Choose your email address carefully.
Oh, right, okay.
Because
you would think you wouldn't have to say this.
Yeah, but as clerk,
yeah.
If you, especially for those who don't have a school email address,
or not initially, because sometimes the communication isn't with a school one initially.
You know, just think about Gmail's free, so specify. No, but it's really quite scary.
It's true.
Some of the email addresses, some of the names. For personal, it's fine. But because if you're becoming a governor or if you are a governor, I think it's also important that you adopt that professionalism.
Yes, of course.
That level of professionalism. And if we're sending documents to you, and especially if your email address is listed on the governor's contact details.
Of course, yeah.
First impressions do count.
Yeah, and your clerk's seeing that.
And we see that.
What kind of personality does this person have? Cool dude at hotmail.co.uk. I would say, just to wrap up today's episode, that my takeaway would be to continue to show gratitude towards the work that the clerks that I am connected to do, because I genuinely appreciate what they do. I think it could be partially influenced by the fact that I know a clerk so personally, so I see a lot of the behind the scenes, so it almost shows a different perspective I'm coming from than someone else who has no experience of knowing a clerk personally. And probably also being aware of, maybe sometimes it's just assumed that clerks will sort themselves out, whereas governors are almost taken care of by the clerk. Yeah. Sometimes it's like it's assumed that clerks they'll sort it out. If they need something, they'll do it on their own terms or whatever. So maybe it's a case of looking at that in terms of seeing if, just like with governors, you're one voice, but that's like 10 or 12, 15 different people feeding in. The clerk is a very isolated position around that table. So it may require a governor to, say, clerk, is there anything that you might need? Recognize, governors, that you may actually have to be the voice for the person who doesn't have a voice around that table, or may feel like they don't, or it may seem like they don't. Especially now,
as we're switching between virtual and in-person meetings and things like that. Ask your clerk what they prefer. Because they have a right, they have an opinion as well, and a right to make a decision.
Because their attendance at those meetings is crucial. Absolutely crucial. So it would be that. But I definitely appreciate us almost having an entire episode about this role, because I think it's so important. And it would be good to delve into the other roles and responsibilities around the governing body table, but definitely insightful, 100%.
Yeah. Thanks for listening to today's episode. Please rate, review, and subscribe via your preferred streaming platform. The Governor's Podcast is a brand of the legal entity Education Governance Solutions Limited, and a free training resource for anyone. So if you know someone who is interested in becoming a governor or a trustee, please share this podcast with them. And if you'd like to get in touch with us directly with questions or comments, then drop us an email at thegovernorspodcast@gmail.com.
You can also follow us on social media platforms at The Governor's Podcast. Let's connect.